You already know what this feels like. That moment when everything falls apart, and you find yourself asking the one question that no one around you can answer. Why is this happening to me? For thousands of years, the greatest minds in Jewish history asked that same question. And what they discovered, after decades of study, of loss, of personal suffering, was not what anyone expected. It was not a comfort. It was not a simple answer. It was something far more powerful than both. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, the way you see your own pain may never be the same. Welcome. Today we are stepping into one of the most profound chapters of ancient Jewish wisdom, a teaching that has helped generations of Jewish people survive exile, persecution, and loss, and emerge from it not broken, but transformed. We are going to look at what the Talmud, the great body of Jewish law and wisdom, actually says about suffering. Not what you might expect, not platitudes, real answers, real stories, real rabbis. If this is your first time here, this channel explores ancient Jewish wisdom every week. Subscribe before we go any further, because what we are uncovering here deserves your full attention. The Jewish people have a special relationship with suffering, not because they sought it, not because they accepted it quietly, but because, across more than 3,000 years of history, they refused to let it be meaningless. The Talmud, compiled over centuries by hundreds of rabbis, contains an entire discussion dedicated to one question: why do the righteous suffer? It is one of the oldest questions in human history. Moses himself asked it. The book of Exodus records Moses at the burning bush crying out to God, "O Lord, why have you brought trouble upon this people?" Thousands of years later, the prophet Jeremiah asked the same thing. Why does the way of the wicked prosper? Why do all the faithless live at ease? These were not weak men losing their faith. These were the greatest figures in Jewish history, wrestling honestly with a question that every human being eventually faces. And the rabbis of the Talmud did not shy away from it either. One of the most remarkable moments in the entire Talmud is a passage where Rabbi Yannai, one of the great sages, simply says, "It is not in our power to explain why the wicked are at ease, or the righteous suffer." Mishnah Avot 4:19. A great rabbi, admitting he did not know. That honesty alone is striking. But the rabbis did not stop at the question. They kept going. And what they found next changed everything. In the Talmud, Tractate Berachot, chapter 5, Rabbi Simeon ben Yochai makes a statement that has echoed through Jewish history for nearly 2,000 years. He teaches, God gave 3 precious gifts to Israel, and all 3 were given only through suffering. Those 3 gifts are the Torah, the land of Israel, and the world to come. Read that again slowly. The Torah, the most sacred text in Judaism. The land of Israel, the foundation of Jewish identity. The world to come, the promise of eternal life. The 3 greatest gifts God gave only came through pain. Now, why would a loving God do that? The rabbis had a specific answer. They said, because suffering refines. Just as a goldsmith uses fire not to destroy the gold, but to remove everything that is not gold, suffering, in Jewish teaching, removes everything that is not essential, everything that is not real. It strips away distraction. It reveals what actually matters. And here is what I find most remarkable about this teaching. Rabbi Simeon was not speaking theoretically. He spent years hiding in a cave to escape Roman persecution. He lost friends. He watched his world collapse. And from inside that suffering, he came to understand something that a comfortable life never could have taught him, that the gifts worth having are the ones that cost something to receive. But Rabbi Simeon was not the only one wrestling with this. In Tractate Berachot 5b, one of the most studied passages in the entire Talmud, the rabbis introduce a concept that is unlike anything most people have encountered. They call it Yisurin shel Ahava. In English, afflictions of love. The idea is this: not all suffering is punishment. Some suffering, the rabbis taught, is something entirely different. It is a sign of closeness. They point to Proverbs 3:12, which says, "For whom the Lord loves, he corrects. As a father the son, he delights in." Think about that image. A father who loves his child does not let them walk into danger without a warning, does not let them make the same mistake endlessly without guidance, does not allow a character flaw to grow unchecked. The discipline of a loving parent is not the same as punishment. It is attention. It is investment. It is a refusal to give up on you. The Talmud teaches, when a person is visited by afflictions they cannot explain, when they search their actions and find no obvious cause, they should consider this possibility, that they are not being punished, that they are being held, that the suffering is not a sign that God has abandoned them. It is a sign of the opposite. Now I want to tell you a story from the Talmud that has stayed with me since the first time I encountered it. It is the story of Rabbi Akiva, one of the greatest scholars in all of Jewish history. Rabbi Akiva began life as an illiterate shepherd. He did not learn to read until he was 40 years old. He went on to become one of the pillars of Jewish law, a man whose teachings fill the Talmud and whose students shape the entire future of Judaism. And then, the Romans arrested him for the crime of publicly teaching the Torah. He was tortured to death. The Talmud records, in Tractate Menachot 29b, that Moses himself was shown a vision of this moment. Moses watched Rabbi Akiva teaching. He saw his brilliance, his dedication, the lives he had transformed. And then Moses was shown what would happen to him. And Moses cried out, "Sovereign of the universe, such Torah and such a reward." God's response, as recorded in the Talmud, was simply, "Be silent, for such is my decree." This is not a comfortable story. The rabbis did not include it in the Talmud to make people feel better. They included it because it is honest. Because sometimes there is no explanation that fits inside a human mind. Because sometimes the only response available is the one Rabbi Akiva himself gave. As the Romans took his life, he recited the Shema, the declaration of God's oneness. And when asked how he could pray in that moment, he said, "All my life I wondered when I would have the chance to love God with all my soul. Now I have the chance." He did not see his suffering as abandonment. He saw it as the moment his faith became real. I want to come back to where we started. That question you have asked, maybe recently, maybe for years, why is this happening to me? The ancient rabbis, honest as they were, would not pretend to have a complete answer. Rabbi Yanai told us plainly, some things are beyond our ability to fully understand. But what they offered instead was something more useful than an explanation. They offered a framework. The first part of the framework, look at your situation honestly, not with guilt, but with open eyes. Is there something here that is calling you to grow? Something to examine? Something to change? The Talmud says in Barakot 5a, if a person sees that afflictions are visiting him, let him examine his deeds. Not as punishment, as invitation. The second part, if you examine yourself and find nothing, consider the possibility that this suffering is not against you, that it is for you, that you are being refined, that something precious is being built inside you that comfort alone could never create. The three greatest gifts in Jewish tradition only came through suffering. Perhaps that is true for you too. What strikes me most about the Jewish tradition on suffering is not any single teaching. It is the posture. Generation after generation of Jewish scholars, people who had every reason to be bitter, every justification for despair, chose instead to sit with the question, to study it, to live inside it, to refuse easy answers, and to keep going anyway. That perhaps is the deepest lesson of all. Not that suffering has a neat explanation, but that it can be carried with dignity, with faith, with the conviction that even in the darkest moment, you have not been forgotten. If this video opened something in you, a thought, a question, something you needed to hear, subscribe to this channel. Every week we go deeper into ancient Jewish wisdom, teachings that have sustained a people through impossible odds and that carry something for all of us. And I want to ask you something personal. Is there a moment in your life when suffering taught you something that nothing else could have? Share it in the comments below. You do not have to go into detail. Even one word is enough. I read every comment, and your story matters. And if you want to keep going right now, the video on your screen explores another ancient Jewish teaching that most people have never encountered. It will change how you see something you thought you already understood. Thank you for being here. Shalom.